More Earth Science. All right, this is Norris Teaches Science with me, Mr. Norris, in another Earth Science edition of my videos. And today we're going to talk about rivers and streams. So the goal of the video, I can explain the relationship between rivers and streams and the hydrosphere. So, freshwater facts. Just like to do them again. We're still talking about some fresh water. Primary use of fresh water in the United States is agriculture. In our homes, we use the most fresh water to wash, clean, and flush. And the typical person in an industrialized nation uses 700 to 1,000 gallons of fresh water per week. And if you live in the United States, you're in an industrialized nation. All right, so what is a river? What is a stream? Well, it's a flow of water on the surface of the earth. It cannot be absorbed by the soil, and it's usually caused by runoffs. You can see a river stream right here circling in red. Well, that's also a river or a stream. All right, it's just flowing into stuff, and one goes into another, and that comes into a stream profile. All right, there are three main parts to a stream or a river or anything like that. You have the headwater, the mouth, and the tributaries. All right, the headwater is the beginning of the stream, and usually it is in the mountains or at higher elevations. Before I go on, pause this video, draw this picture to the side, because I'm going to label it with where everything is. Did you pause? I hope you paused. I'm going to go on now. So I just talked about the headwater. So it's usually in the mountains. My little triangle's up here because I made this picture because I'm not the best artist on stuff. The triangles are mountains, so these would be the headwaters. The mouth is at the end of the stream, and the mouth is usually going into another water body, or it's usually the ultimate goal is to go into the ocean. So here would be the mouth. Tributaries are little small streams that empty into another stream. So these little small river streams right here are tributaries. And this is kind of a stream profile. A simplified version, it could be really complex in it. Now, when we talk about some rivers and streams, we're going to talk about some basics. You have the watershed, an area of land that contains a common set of stream or rivers. You can see this watershed outlined here. And a drainage basin is the land area that contributes to the water to the stream. So this talks about the rivers. This talks about all the water going into all the streams. Base level is really important when you talk about rivers and streams because it's the lowest point to which a stream can erode. The ultimate base level is the sea level, being at sea level, right there where the sea water is. But you can have temporary or local base levels like lakes or another stream. Like here, you can look. Here's the headwater is coming in, and here's a little lake. This would be a temporary base level, and then it comes back out and keeps going down until it gets to this ocean, which is the ultimate base level. Now, meandering streams do not just stay in the constant flow that they are once they're made. They're actually slow moving, and this is usually meandering streams are usually located on flat regions or territories, and sometimes these can cause lakes. What happens is it meanders, and then at some point right here, instead of going all the way around, it makes a little shortcut and makes the river a little shorter here, but it cuts off all this water, but the water's still there because it's a flat area, so that turns into a lake. Sometimes we call it an elbow lake. Now, when you deal with rivers and when you deal with streams, you're going to have to deal with something called a flood. So what is a flood? Is when a stream or a river overflows the capacity that it can have, and the water overflows its banks. A main causes of them are storms and snowmelts. I live in North Carolina. We get a lot of our flooding when we get hurricanes. Where I live, I'm actually at a very higher elevation than the surrounding areas. We had a hurricane come through, Hurricane Matthew, and it actually flooded everywhere around me. So I was kind of a little island. I couldn't go anywhere for like weeks. But flooding can be a big problem when it comes to rivers and streams. Now, the reason where flooding is going to happen because of the floodplain. This is the area where water will flood the land. It's close to the stream, and people built and worked on floodplains because the land is fertile. It's really good for growing crops. The problem is you have to deal with the problem of floods when they happen. Now, are floods good or bad? Well, they're both. The pros of having or the positives of having a flood, they do supply nutrient rich soil to the floodplain and they will recharge the groundwater rapidly. Um, the Nile River floods its banks every year to create more fertile land on the banks of the Nile River. They all know that. But the problems with floods, they kill organisms, they can cause property damage, and sometimes they can cause mass erosions. If you think, I just mentioned about Hurricane Matthew and the floods around here. One thing that it did do, it did mass erosions and it took out roads, like just took them out because of all the erosion. So it becomes good and bad. You have to weigh your options with a flood. They have some good parts to it, they have some bad parts to it. Now, how to control floods? We have artificial levees. These are built by humans. They can either be concrete or earthen mounds, and they increase the amount of water that can be held by the bank. Louisiana, New Orleans flooded in Hurricane Katrina because their artificial levees failed. Just a heads up on that's just how that happened. Natural levees are parallel to the streams and they help contain the water, but not during a flood stage. They occur naturally. We can also have flood control dams. This is we store the flood water behind the dam and we let it out slowly so it doesn't flood the area. And then also the best thing is just limit your development on a floodplain or don't live on a floodplain. You don't want to be at the risk of a flood. Don't live on a floodplain. But sometimes it just can't be helped. Human activities that do increase flooding or cause flooding or make flooding worse. Removal of vegetation. Vegetation is really there to absorb the water, to hold the soil in place, and it can help mediate some of the flooding. Overgrazing, that's again, if you go back, that's when animals eat too much of the vegetation. So it goes right back with removing vegetation, but with a different aspect. Mining, building on a floodplain, don't build on them if you can. Logging, forest fires, destruction of wetlands. Wetlands are like a sponge. They're supposed to absorb flood waters. And urbanization, that goes back to don't building on a floodplain. Don't have houses on a floodplain. But that's a little bit about river streams, even a little bit about flooding. I hope you learned something today. And this is Mr. Norris, and he's out for this video.